Hello everyone, this is Pico Entertainment and we are back again, and we're now going to talk about football and the huge recent controversy surrounding the announcement that many of Europeans' elite clubs are signing a proposal to break away from the Champions League and compete in a separate European Super League. Now, this news broke yesterday and there's been a lot of debate and outrage about it, so before I give my thoughts, we're just going to go over quickly what exactly is going on in terms of this announcement. So essentially what is happening is the Super League is basically a 20-team breakaway league with matches to be played midweek and the end of season playoffs to determine who the winners are. Now they plan to begin with this format from the 2022 to 2023 season. So essentially there will be 15 founding clubs who will always be in the league, so they can never be relegated from this competition, and then there will be 5 additional clubs who will be able to qualify for the European Super League each season. I assume that will be through the various domestic competition leagues that they play in already. Now the matches for the European Super League will be played midweek and the clubs will be able to still play in their domestic leagues overall. Now, essentially, what it will be set up with 2 groups of 10. So 2 sets of clubs playing, batches of 10. They will play midweek throughout the season, and then what will happen is the top 4 from both of those 2 leagues will end up going off in a playoff, essentially to decide who is the top team within the whole competition setup. So we'd have a quarter-final, semi-finals and finals. So the top 3 would qualify automatically, and then there would be a playoff between the 4th and 5th teams that play, and then they will be able to compete then for the overall winner for the whole tournament. Now, when I heard this news, essentially, to begin with, I was a bit sceptical, only because we've gone through this cycle so many times. Throughout the last 10-15 years, it's been constantly debated that the certain clubs are going to break away into this Super League, and it's never happened, right? Because normally what essentially happens is that they come across so many barriers from various football organisations, European organisations, certain supporters, big supporter groups, etc. There's just so many people that are against this idea of the top teams breaking away and basically competing on their own that it never falls through. So we all know this is mainly about money. They feel that by breaking away into their own separate competition, they can always play these prolific matches and rake in the money, because that's what will gain them the most viewership and the most sponsorship from that. So that's really been the ongoing intention from these big teams, to always break away and play on their own. Now we do know for the last couple of months or so there's been ongoing debates with the clubs and UEFA, because there's been this debate over the format of the Champions League and how they want to, I think, include more teams again. If you remember, it did get reduced in certain rounds. That we used to have 2 group phases, if you remember, going way back, and then they reduced it to 1 group phase, and then you would have knockout rounds after that. And that was because people were complaining that we were getting too many dead rubber matches or mismatches just for the sake of qualifying, so it was clogging up the whole fixture list. So that's why they reduced it down in the first place. Now, when we look at the teams involved here, so the teams that have been confirmed in terms of signing up this proposal, it's the 6 Premier League clubs, so Arsenal, Chelsea, Liverpool, Man United, City and Spurs. You have the 3 Spanish teams, Atletico Madrid, Real Madrid and Barcelona, and the 3 Italian teams, Juventus, AC Milan and Inter Milan. And likely but not confirmed yet, we have Bayern Munich, Borussia Dortmund and PSG. So the funding that they're stating here is that the English clubs will apparently get 310 million up front as part of a huge purse of 4.6 billion funding. As I explained before, the founding members, which are 15 likely, can never be relegated from this league. And as I mentioned, 2 groups of 10, top 4 playing each other going into playoffs. The overall winners could get an extra 212 million. So that's basically the setup of this. Now, I've always been sceptical, as I mentioned before, because if you think about it, we are in a pandemic, right, where currently matches are going on without any crowd. So obviously clubs are not receiving any money in terms of gate revenue. So where are these numbers going to come from, right? Because if you're going to put a huge amount of investment into this project, then eventually you're going to want to see some huge amount of return. But where's that return going to come from? If the clubs are going to compete in this league without any crowds, then where are they going to see a return on investment? Now, people could say, hopefully by 2022, 2023, enough people will get vaccinated for the COVID. By then, we can expect to see crowds coming back to football matches. And we do know that they are currently testing, I think it's in Wembley Stadium, crowds coming back to stadiums in some form of capacity. But we never know what could happen by the 2022-2023 season. There could be another spike in the COVID. We always hear these speculative reports about certain variants happening in certain countries. So we don't know how the pandemic is going to pan out by the time we get to this 2022-2023 season anyway. So even if we get that season, how many people are still going to be confident enough to travel to games knowing that this COVID, potentially they could still contract it even though they have vaccination? So it's still a long way to go. So that's one thing you've got to bear in mind. Like, where is all this money going to come from? Right? I imagine a lot of clubs are operating in debt already. So this isn't going to all of a sudden take them to this prosperous destination where they can start rolling around in all this huge waves of cash all of a sudden. You know, it's going to take a long time. So that was my other real query on this, is that the pandemic scenario that we're in at the moment, I don't see how these clubs are feeling that they're going to break away and all of a sudden come across all of these riches. And even if it is a short-term boom in terms of the revenue they receive, long-term, can it be sustained? Right? That's the other question we've got to ask. Now, people may ask, well, what will happen with the current Champions League? Well, essentially, this will eliminate the Champions League, right? Because the whole point of Champions League is that you have these elite clubs, Real Madrid, Barcelona, Juventus, etc., AC Milan. You have them competing in that tournament because that brings in all the image endorsements and all the sponsorships and the viewership, right? So even if they were to break away from this Champions League into the European Super League, and essentially you could still have the Champions League existing, where even if the clubs participating in the European Super League, even if they got evicted from their domestic leagues, as what certainly the Premier League are threatening to do, then the other teams competing in the domestic leagues could then qualify and go in the Champions League as well. Now, in theory, yes, that could happen, but in actuality, as I mentioned before, the promotion and the interest that the likes of Real Madrid and Barcelona bring to the competition is really what the Champions League provides and relies on. So if you take that away, then they're not really going to have much of a functional Champions League. So it would essentially kill the Champions League dead in its tracks. And also it would affect the competitive nature of the Premier League and the domestic leagues of other countries as well, because the whole nature of this league is that who will win the championship, who will qualify for the top four, who will qualify for Europa League, and who will get relegated, right? But if you already know that a select amount of clubs are always going to qualify for this European Super League, right, then it takes away a lot of the competitive edge. You would eventually get a scenario where you'd get the big clubs resting players for the Premier League on a regular basis, just so they can put out their stronger teams in this European Super League, right? We see that to a degree, perhaps, already in terms of the current setup that we have, especially when we get to the latter stages of the European tournaments. If a club, let's say Arsenal, for example, are already out of the competition in terms of the top four, in terms of winning it, and they can't go down, then yeah, at that stage, they will save players for the more important European tournaments if they found themselves in the latter stages. But this would be much more of a widespread effect. So you'd already have these big clubs from week one already thinking about reserving some of their players for the Premier League in order to compete more in this European Super League. So it would have a massive effect on the Premier League competition as well, and that's the danger, that's the problem, and that's the worry that I think a lot of people are talking about if this were to happen. Now, as I mentioned before, we're seeing so much outrage and passionate feelings about this, and that's right, you know, because people don't want their game to be completely destroyed, if you like, by the fact that the top teams going away, and therefore the smaller clubs won't be able to really earn their achievements on true merit, right? So if you take all the top clubs away from all the leagues, then let's say if Aston Villa or West Ham win it, it's always going to be tainted because the big clubs aren't involved. This is what made the Leicester Premier League win so special, because they had to compete against all the big clubs in order to win the league. That's what made it such a standout moment for the Premier League in general. But if you take that away, then it's going to taint the Premier League overall. So that's the big question. But my overall thoughts on it is that I don't think this will happen. As I mentioned before, we've had regular proposals about clubs breaking away from a Super League for many years now, 10, 15 years, and it never comes to fruition because you'll get big enough individuals, big enough groups, big enough factions always eventually blocking it and, curtailing it from happening. And you'll get UEFA going against this. You'll get, I imagine, a lot of FIFA representatives going against this. And you will get a lot of people within various clubs and Premier League going against this as well. There'll be such a resistance that they won't be able to go ahead of it. And we talk about fans, and a lot of fans say that, well, if this happened, they would boycott games. Now, we know the true nature of the fan. They're passionate about their club, and they eventually will go and watch their team, whatever they play, whether it's Europa League, whether it's a training session, whether it's a pre-season game, they will always go and watch their team. So I would actually just question that. I think you would get some fans, a portion, if you do have crowds allowed in stadiums again, they would actually go to watch these European Super League matches. But there would be some resistance. And again, that could be something that they could affect their plans. If we do hypothetically have a full capacity of games again, and you have fans boycotting games, then that's going to affect their potential revenue as well. So that's why I don't think this is going to happen. And to be honest, I wasn't going to do a video on it because, like I said before, I think after the initial outrage and after the initial vindication, if you like, or the vilification of this issue, once everything calms down and then everybody who's involved actually go through the process of trying to implement this, and then they go through all the various barriers and resistance, I think that's eventually that they will back down. And we know as well that clubs always do this every couple of years as a negotiation tactic if there are ever any disputes between them and UEFA in the long run. And I think that's why we get these announcements every couple of years about a breakaway Super League. But my short thoughts on it is, I don't think it's going to happen. I just think it's a case of again, this is just a negotiation tactic just to scare UEFA. They're unhappy with the current format or the current changes that will come into play for the Champions League, and that's why then they want to change it overall. Those are what I think will happen overall, and I don't think this European Super League will happen, but we will wait and see what happens in the future. I'm pretty sure we will get further announcements in the short-term future as to whether this will actually happen or not. But those are my thoughts quickly on the proposed plans for a European Super League. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you think this will happen? Do you think it's just more negotiating from the big clubs involved in terms of trying to get their way with UEFA in terms of the Champions League and its current format? Or do you think this will actually happen? And if it does, how do you think this will affect the Premier League and other European domestic leagues as well? And if it does come to fruition, can it be sustained? Are they able to put that huge influx of money in and expect a huge return in their investment? Will fans go? Will we be at a stage in the pandemic where we can have full capacity crowds at stadiums again? And that's a very big if at this point as well. So there's a lot of potential ifs and buts and hypothetical situations that could come from this, but we will see what will happen in the future. But if there are any further updates, then I will give my thoughts and feelings on those as well. So that's it for now, really. My thoughts on the European Super League. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Please hit those like and subscription and notification buttons and help me provide more thoughts and content for you in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, stay at safe distances, and I will see you very, very soon.